Friday morning, seeing a corrective bounce off multi-month lows ahead of the weekend. Canola up $6 to over $7. The November contract up $6.60 at $673.50 per ton. January up $7.20 at $689.30. Gains in the Chicago soy complex provided spillover support, with European rapeseed and Malaysian palm oil futures also up in overnight activity. Canada exported just over 200,000 tons of canola during the past week, according to the latest Canadian Grain Commission data. That was up slightly from the previous week and the largest monthly total of the crop year to date. However, total exports through 12 weeks of 1.3 million tons are still down about 11% compared to last year. Domestic disappearance, meanwhile, was down slightly on the week, but the year-to-date level of 2.4 million tons is up by 12% on the year. In the U.S., soybean and corn futures are higher, while wheat is posting losses. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East remains a feature in the background, with the resulting volatility in world energy and financial markets spilling into the grains and oilseeds. Soybeans have been underpinned by solid export demand recently, with framework deals signed between China and the U.S. exporters earlier this week, although there was no fresh business announced today. November beans up 14 cents at $12.94 per bushel. Recent snow and rain across large portions of the northern U.S. will be delaying the later stages of the soybean harvest, but will help moisture conditions in the long run. November options are expiring today, and that could lead to some volatility. Corn, it's posting small gains, finding some spillover support from the advances in the soy complex. The December contract up 3 cents at $4.83 per bushel. France's corn harvest is nearing completion according to reports, with 85% of the crop off the field. That's up by about 11 points from the 5-year average. Wheat futures are steady to lower. Minneapolis spring wheat down only a quarter cent in the December contract at $7.24 per bushel, while Kansas City hard red winter wheat down 8 cents in the December contract at $6.46 per bushel. Chicago soft wheat down 3 cents in December at $5.76 per bushel. While talk that Ukraine was suspending grain movement through the Black Sea due to increased Russian threats had supported wheat prices yesterday, Ukrainian officials have denied those rumors and are claiming that grain is still moving. That's a look at the ICE futures and U.S. markets for Friday, October 27th. In Winnipeg, for MarketsFarm.com, I'm Phil Franz Warkentin.
A job well done starts with great equipment, and right now, you'll save big on that equipment at Butler. The end-of-year clearance is on now at Butler Farm Equipment, with huge savings on mowers and specials on 100 horsepower plus tractors. Save now and give yourself a big pat on the back next spring. Butler Farm Equipment, decades of delivering great service in the Peace Country. To learn more about their brands, equipment, and the end-of-the-year clearance, see them on Facebook or at butlerfarmequipment.ca.
The opinions expressed during this show do not represent those of this station. If you've missed any of this show, you can follow the podcast at energeticcity.ca. Now, an in-depth look at the news and information shaping our community. This is Moose Talks with your host, Doug Craig, on Moose FM.
Welcome to another episode of the show. A little later on, we're going to sit down with Fort St. John North Peace Museum curator Heather Sjoblom. There are 2 businesses in historic buildings for sale in Fort St. John right now, so we'll talk a bit about the history of these buildings, as well as what the Historical Society does when these places of history change hands. But first, winter weather hit us hard at the start of this week, and a story came out about how emergency shelter beds in Fort St. John are already almost at capacity. Now, there was a story in energeticcity.ca about this yesterday, but to follow up a bit more about it and talk about the city's role in ensuring people experiencing homelessness have adequate shelter this winter, we're joined now by Fort St. John City Councillor Trevor Bolin. Trevor, welcome back to Moose Talks.
Thanks for having me, Deb.
I know you were having quite the discussion with people on Facebook about this specific story that kind of came out about this. First of all, I just wanted to know if this came as a surprise to you that they're already being used as much as they are at the Northern Center Hope and kind of the Salvation Army, or if this was something you were sort of like you and the city council were expecting to see this winter, that it might be, we might be stretching ourselves to make sure that everyone's taken care of, essentially.
Yeah, and great starting question. I think we were shocked only because it's kind of like when you're shocked for winter. You know what? You know it's going to come. You know it's going to come. You know it's going to get cold. You still don't have everything put away, and boom, it snows, right? And I think that's the exact same thing that's being experienced right now. So did we know it was coming? I mean, we should have known it was coming. They're 30% increase in the homelessness in the last count, over top of the one previously. The issues that we've seen on Facebook with residents' concerns over the Salvation Army and the blame game. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of us expected that it was already full, and going to be short 20 beds or 30 beds, and the winter season hadn't even started yet. What were we, 4 days in?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is sort of a multi-jurisdictional issue because, of course, the people are here in Fort St. John. They're accessing services through nonprofits and charities like the Salvation Army or the Women's Resource Society, but housing is a provincial thing, and the BC housing, which is run by the province. I mean, the Salvation Army relies, for example, on funding from BC Housing to make sure that there are kind of, shelters and enough room for people to use the shelters at winter time. So it becomes a challenge because, as you say in the post, I mean, it's not our responsibility, but the province is sort of keeps seeming to download this onto municipalities like Fort St. John to deal with the homeless, kind of to make sure that homeless people have places to stay and are taken care of.
They do, and I think it's become too easy for the province to do that, right? And we sit back, and of course residents get upset, and residents look to city council because they can't find their MLAs and their MPs as easily as they can find their city council, right? They see us in restaurants and grocery stores, right? They see us in our neighborhoods as neighbors. So it's a lot easier to say, hey, what are you guys doing about this? Why aren't you dealing with this issue? And we look to the province and say, why are you not dealing with this issue? It is your responsibility as BC Housing or as the ministry to ensure that the vulnerable in our communities are taken care of. And, and they're not doing that, and my concern and my fear, and I reiterated on Facebook the other day, is that if the city does this, our residents, is this what they want? Do you want this to become a taxpayer municipal issue? Because it's going to cost a lot of money, and it, not only costs a lot of money, but there's going to be then, severe consequences to the services we provide. Right? What do we provide? Additional parks, or do we provide additional housing? Right? Because all that money comes from the same pot. So, honestly, BC Housing needs to step up. We've talked amongst ourselves as council. Do we go to some of the church organizations or some of the other, not-for-profit organizations and say, hey, do you have the capacity to do this? Can we help you to secure funding from the province? I had an interview yesterday about this, and my biggest, message to the province is clear the red tape, make this an easy process. If we've got an organization or a group that's willing to help out with this over the winter, this could be a monumental change, but the province needs to ensure that they're quick, ready, and able to provide that funding right now.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's another sort of part to this problem, which is the warming center, and we don't really know what's happening with that, which, as I understand, is under the guise of sort of Northern Health. They were running it, ensuring whoever was running it had funding or whatnot. And as far as we know, that hasn't been secured for this winter yet. So, I mean, again, when you're the city council and you're seeing this happening in the city, I guess my larger question is, has there been discussions yet or thoughts on what are we going to do if the PC government doesn't help us out, if we don't have this situation? What's sort of our backup plan? Because even as you say, we may not want to pay for it, but these are people in our community who need these things, and not having adequate shelter in minus 30 could mean a death sentence.
It absolutely could. And I mean, this morning was downtown, not far from the Salvation Army, and there is a trailer, an enclosed trailer, and that has been taken over now. I noticed by some of the vulnerable in the city, and they're sleeping in there, and they're using candles to heat it, and they've got 4 or 5 blankets in there, and we're only -8 last night, -9 last night.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine -30. I seen the Women's Resource Center calls for tents and camping equipment and stuff like that, and you know what? I think even the best of the best when it comes to campers and hikers and Arctic expedition goers would barely be prepared for what we experience in our winters, let alone somebody who has no idea what they're getting into at -30 and trying to sleep, outside. So, I mean, it's got to be a conversation we have with the community. It's got to be something that, A, we're going to continue to hammer the provincial government. B, we're going to continue to reach out to any partners that we have and ensure that if they've got questions, they know we're readily available and that we will help them for whatever we can. The last thing we want is for people to be left on the streets, the potential of severe frostbite, this potential of death, which is very real. And not to blame the Salvation Army. This isn't a Salvation Army issue. The Salvation Army is not set up for 50 emergency shelter beds. So, you talked a little bit about the warming center. That was phenomenal the last couple of years. We hope that Northern Health gets in a position where they can open that up in a decent time. From what I've heard, that was going to be part of the facility that they're working on right now as far as the overdose prevention site. I don't see a lot of activity there, so I'm not sure how far along they are. But if we could, ideally, if things were all rosy and good, we'd see Northern Health open up that per day warming shelter. We'd see the Salvation Army be able to do the expected amount of beds that they're going to do, that 30 beds and do it well. In talking with Jared, one of the things he did say is sometimes when they've gone a little bit over capacity, it's because somebody who's got a room already has a friend that needs a room, and they have a foamy sort of an idea. So, right, because my question was, I'm like, Jared, what happens when 31 people show up? Well, it became a reality because they were already at 28. So I said, what happened if 3 people show up? 3 more people show up. You're over capacity by 1 based on what your business plan is, and we're already in trouble. And it was like, what was it, October 23rd? So, I think that they're very well aware that they could be into something similar to what they were last year, where they've got to have space. But at the end of the day, I think it's honestly, Dub, it's being proactive. It's not placing blame. It's not going after the services that are already provided. It's how can we enhance what we don't even know we have yet, because Fort St. John is a very giving community. It is a very caring community. So, I don't expect the residents to have to foot the bill for this, but I expect them to be very loud and very clear when it comes to dealing with the MLA and the ministers and the provincial end of things, that we expect better for our community. And I don't think that we're out of line to expect better.
Mm-hmm. Well, last question for you, because I've seen it come up a lot again in kind of discussions on Facebook. The empty old RCMP kind of detachment. People say, well, why can't that be useful in this situation? I just wondered, what your thoughts are on if that's something that's even been thought about as maybe something we could put a temporary shelter in there if we need to. Is that even a possibility?
It's a good question, and I mean, we've seen it about shelters, we've seen it about an OPS site, we've seen it about a lot of different things. So first and foremost is that building has not been decommissioned, right? Mm-hmm. So there is not usable jail cells in that building, as we've seen people ask questions about and say, hey, you know what? They've already got little rooms in them. There is not enough washrooms to be considered an emergency shelter.
Yeah.
There is not enough open space to be considered an emergency shelter. It needs electrical upgrades because the breakers trip. It is not a to current sort of code building, right? So when you've got a building that was built 30 years ago, it was not built for the technology that we've got in our homes right now. So over the course of time, you upgrade and you change. Well, that building needs a complete renovation before it can be used for anything like that. So although love that people are coming up with different ideas and addressing them and sharing them online. It needs to be ideas that we can put into play immediately. But it also needs to be ideas that I feel hold the province accountable and hold BC Housing accountable. This is their sole job. It's like, guys, you got one job. You got one job, which is to ensure that people are not homeless, especially in conditions like that, and you're failing at that job. So, the minister needs to step up. We've had conversations with our MLA about him, hammering down on them to ensure that they understand the position we're in. I think oftentimes, though, you're living down south, you don't realize Fort St. John has a homeless problem. You don't realize there's a vulnerable population that lives on the street throughout the summer. We have gorgeous summers. And I think, honestly, that politicians sitting down on the island or down in Vancouver and downtown by the water don't ever assume that somebody would try to attempt to be homeless in Fort St. John. It's a reality. And I think that seeing these numbers grow by 25 and 30% over the last couple of years, it's going to continue to get worse. Is it out of line? No, because our population's increasing as such as well, right? And we've seen this happen before. We just didn't have Facebook to share it all over. So, at the end of the day, open communication, transparency, working together, and ensuring that we are one. It takes all of us to make this community great.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Mr. Bolin, thank you so much for being here today to talk to us about this.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. That's City Councillor Trevor Bolin here on Moose Talks. We'll be right back to talk to Heather Sjoblom and talk a bit about the museum and their role in the community right after this.
Moose FM is out and about, supporting your favorite local business.
Okay, time flies by really fast, and Arctic Spas here in Fort St. John is celebrating 25 years. My name is Bernard from the afternoon show. They are celebrating hard, so you use your hot tub more often this winter. Take 10% off on chemicals, filters, and accessories. As Northerners, we barbecue all year round, even in minus 30 weather. 10% off on barbecue accessories, rubs, and sauces. Also, just today from 11 till 1, stop by for some delicious brisket pulled pork sandwiches. So good, and made using the amazing Traeger. It's the Arctic Spa's 25th anniversary celebration on today here in Fort St. John.
Ooh, October, where instead of giving out free candy, Prevail Athletics is giving out a free month of memberships and tanning. Until October 31st, buy 3 months and get the 4th month free, and all classes are included in your membership. Spin, boot camp, Zumba, and hot yoga in Fort St. John's only hot yoga studio. Buy 3 months, get the 4th month free on memberships and tanning until October 31st. Find full details at Prevail Athletics Fort St. John on Facebook.
Get the best gear to keep you warm on the job at Edwards Factory Outlet Grand Prairie.
They have quilted jackets starting at just $59.95, up to 6XL tall. Fire retardant jackets are $199.95, and men's fire retardant coveralls with stripes are only $99.95.
Edwards also has a wide range of new Tough Duck winter gear and CSA winter work boots from brands like Baffin, Boggs, Muck Boots, Dunlop, and many more.
Everyone has their price. At Edwards Factory Outlet Grand Prairie, it's just less.
Ernie's Sports Experts get you ready for winter. Gloves, toques, and mitts. Buy a kid's winter jacket, get kids' ski pants half price. Ernie's has a great selection of winter boots, like Sorel or Boggs. The best boots for kids of all ages. And when you spend $250 or more on regular priced outerwear, get a free $50 gift card. Spend $500, get a free $100 gift card. Only at Ernie's Sports Experts.
Sports Experts. Ernie's.
RE/MAX Action Realty celebrated its 30th year in the Peace Country this summer.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
We are just as humbled to be a part of so many families' moves today as we were back then. At RE/MAX, we believe the best advice is the advice of a market professional with decades of experience in this market. Go ahead, ask us anything. Whether you were buying because you need more space or less, or selling for so many different reasons, call your RE/MAX professional today at 250-785-5520.
Watch this show live on Facebook or download the podcast at energeticcity.ca.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Dub Craig. Now we're going to talk a bit about historic buildings in Fort St. John. 2 businesses in town are for sale that are in historic buildings, including the Lido Theater and Whole Wheat and Honey. And a 3rd business just closed that has a lot of attachment to this town's history as well. So to talk about all that and sort of what the Historical Society does when a business changes hands or closes down that has a lot of historical importance to town, we're here to talk with Heather Sjoblom, the curator of the Fort St. John North Peace Museum. Heather, welcome to Moose Talks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. Now, today, when I phoned to ask you to be on the show, you happened to be at the Alaska Highway News Building, kind of, I guess, going to see what sort of maybe artifacts or things that you were collecting for that might be, useful and historically important to the museum. Is that why you were there yesterday?
Yes, as you know, we're scanning the Alaska Highway News, and although they had donated lots of issues and we had some issues previously, we have a whole list of ones that were missing here and there and so on. So it was a last ditch attempt to try and get those issues. So we were lucky. After combing through a lot of dusty stuff, we found 8 of the missing issues. And we were also able to collect some photographs and maps and so on that will be interesting for our collection.
Awesome. Does that mean, though, that there are still some issues that you haven't been able to find and account for so far?
That is correct. Sometimes a whole month, and unfortunately sometimes a whole year, especially when the transition kind of from getting stuff on disk to just saving it on your computer or whatever. We're missing all of 2013 and all of 2014 and 15. So
wow.
If anybody has any issues, we're looking for those. We got worried at the end of 2015 and just started collecting everything in hard copy after that. But I wish we'd done it earlier, but how can you know?
Right. So when you heard the Alaska Highway News was closing, I suppose you guys immediately were like, okay, well, we got to go in there and see, what we can grab. Because this has been the newspaper of record for 80 something years in town, right?
Yep, since 1944.
Mm-hmm. So this kind of leads into sort of these other historical buildings in town. Now, I mentioned the Lido, which, I have Brian on the Lido. He comes on and talks to me once a week. So I know that there's a lot of history in that building. But whole wheat and honey is also for sale. And we just did a story about this over at energeticcity.ca, which talked to you about it. I mean, there's a fair amount of history in that building as well that honestly I didn't even consider. So maybe tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's not just the building, but it's the site. So that land was the homestead of Clark Mackenzie Finch, or C.M. Finch, who the school is named after. And he had a one-room cabin on that land in 1918. So he wanted to start a store. So he started out selling canned beans and rolled oats. He'd just throw a tarp over his bed, and ta-da, it was a store for the day.
Amazing.
He'd also go to parties, and he'd bring canned goods and stuff in his suitcase and sell items out of his suitcase at the party. So he had a traveling store. Anyway, he saved up enough money to build the first official store on that lot. So in the winter of 1927, Red Powell, who had a sawmill out at Charlie Lake, and Martin DeWitt built a large store for Finch there. And a lot of people kind of thought, hey, Finch is a fool to build a big store there. There were competing settlements. There was no community of Fort St. John there. There was the Hudson's Bay Company fort down by the river, and then there were competing communities at Grand Haven and Fish Creek, so near the Malmurray School. But Finch was pretty smart. He donated 5 acres of land for the Catholic Church. He then supplied the hospital with some land and provided land for the cemetery, and then for a government building where the cultural center is today, that was like a post office. And so because he was pretty smart at how he gave land away, and he also had a bit of a post office in his store at one point, the community of Fort St. John in its present location outlasted the competing communities, or grew bigger than the competing communities, and really it became the heart of downtown. So Finch operates his store until 1943, when his health is declining. He dies of cancer a couple of years later. He sells it to Chris Field. And in 1945, the Fort St. John Co-op Association is formed. And they start operating out of the building that was Finch's store. So Fort St. John Co-op Association pretty much sold anything. Like, it was like a department store. So you get clothes, groceries, tools, and so on. And they were the ones who built what's the present day building that houses Whole Wheat and Honey, as well as several other businesses. And that was built, I think, in the 1960s, 1950s. Yeah. And so basically that became a gathering place for the whole community. So people would go, they'd have lunch at the co-op cafeteria, and you owned shares in the co-op association, so they did well, you did well. And lots of people would go and that was the main shopping center for years until we got much bigger, like Hudson's Bay Company department store and so on. So that really became the heart of the community, and still, I mean, that is the center of our community today, and Whole Wheat and Honey is still a gathering or a meeting place for lots of people in the community.
Oh, there you go. I had no idea that building was even, I mean, by that math, 60-something years old now. So, in a situation like that then, Heather, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Whole Wheat and Honey, but say, that business gets sold, there's a decision to change it into something else or whatnot. Really, when anything like that happens around town in sort of, historic places or buildings, what's sort of the society's mandate to go in and make sure that history is preserved? If there's stuff that maybe the owners don't want, that you go in and say, well, we'll take this because we'd love to display it on the museum, keep it in our collection, what have you.
That can always be a bit complicated because as a one-staff museum, we just don't have the capacity to do a crazy amount of contemporary collecting. However, we welcome anybody donating stuff as their business goes out of sale. I mean, we're scanning the newspapers, so we all have lots of information on these businesses, often their grand opening notices and so on. But, anything from a menu or a sign or business cards, or we have a lot of what we call our business drawer. So a whole bunch of business memorabilia, from like pencils or pens that you hand out and so on. For example, from the Lido Theatre's earlier history, we have the Carlsonia and Lido program. This is one from 1958. And then when the Lido started operating on itself, we've got one from 1960. We have a whole bunch of these. But the more community members donate, and it doesn't even have to be the business. If you have something that, it has to do with a business that doesn't exist anymore or so on, like, we are always open to considering donations.
Amazing. Now, is that something you'd like a phone call or reach out via email and say, hey, I've got stuff to donate, or if people want to bring their box, just come by and say hello?
That's fine. If you have a big item, best to call before. Often we'll consider that with a photograph via email so that nobody has to lug it down for us just to say, no, sorry, we don't have room for that. All this stuff goes to our acquisition committee. So they're the ones who decide, do we have similar items already? Is this something that has local history? What kind of condition it's in? Do we have space to take it? And so on.
All right, Heather. Well, we've got a minute left. I just wanted to make sure we brought up kind of the Halloween thing going on at the museum tonight. Tell us a bit about it and, when we got to be there and all that good stuff.
So yeah, our exhibits are all being decorated for Halloween. We got most of it done yesterday. Got to do a little more after this. But basically you can come down tonight. It's a drop-in event for families between 6 and 8 p.m. Please wear costumes if you want. Adults don't have to dress up, but they can. Bring a trick-or-treat bag, enter at the back of the museum, and you'll learn lots of fun facts about Halloween and get some Halloween goodies and take-home crafts.
Awesome, Heather. Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to do this today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. That's Heather Sjoblom, the curator of the Fort St. John North Peace Museum. We'll be right back to wrap things up on Moose Talks right after this.
Moose FM is out and about, supporting your favorite local business.
25 years is a huge milestone, and Arctic Spas Fort St. John is celebrating their anniversary. It's Bernard from the afternoon show. For 25 years, Arctic Spas is your go-to destination for hot tub and accessories like filters and chemicals. Today, you take 10% off on them. And here in the north, you barbecue even in -40 weather. 10% off all barbecue accessories, rubs, and sauces. Talk about barbecuing. They're making brisket and pulled pork sandwiches with the amazing Traeger starting at 11. So grab yourself some delicious lunch. Plus, you can even win a Traeger yourself. See in-store for details. It's the 25th anniversary celebration here at Arctic Spas in Fort St. John.
Think you have the spookiest house? Make your mark on the spookiest house map over at moosefm.ca. We'll be checking out all the spookiest houses in town, and the most terrifying house will win $1,000 in prizes. Visit moosefm.ca for all the details. The Apex Dental Spookiest House is supported by Accent Dental, Grimeswell Service, and 100.1 Moose FM.
The 20th annual Chances Casino Light a Moose Radiothon is back. This year, starting on November 15th until the 17th, we will be broadcasting from outside the casino and raising money for the Fort St. John Hospital Foundation. The goal this year is to raise $170,000 for a new ultrasound machine that will help the imaging department meet the growing demands of their patient population. You can donate online through canada-helps.org or by calling 250-793-0998. The Chances Light a Moose Radiothon from November 15th to the 17th is proudly supported by your Fort St. John Home Hardware, Merwin Optical, the Fort St. John Co-op, Trican Well Servicing, and Rhythm Auctions. Hey, do you want to play a game? Reverse That Song is here. Guess what song is playing in reverse for a chance to win a $50 gift card to So Sweet Cafe and $2.50 pizza each week. We'll play a song in reverse at 2:50 weekday afternoons, so make sure you're ready to call in and make your guess. Good luck and have fun.
Find all your Bible journaling tools at Peaceful Pages. Stop in today and see their selection of Bible tabs, Bible safe pens, markers, and more. Plus, Bibles, devotionals, and faith-based books. Peaceful Pages Christian Bookstore, a peaceful place to escape. Open Tuesday to Saturday on 101 Avenue, Fort St. John.
Moose Country weather.
Today you can expect -2, but mainly sunny skies. Later tonight it's going to dip down to -10. Tomorrow, high of -3, mix of sun and clouds. And on Sunday, it looks like there's going to be a sunny sky with a high of -2.
Our community first. This is Moose Talks with Dub Craig on Moose FM.
My thanks to our guests Trevor Bolin and Heather Sjoblom for joining us today. Make sure you stay up to date every morning with local news delivered straight into your inbox. You can sign up for the energeticcity.ca newsletter right now at energeticcity.ca/newsletters. You can also keep up to date on local municipal politics, government politics, I should say, with our Peace Politics newsletter. There's also a wonderful events newsletter available where we tell you all about the great events happening each weekend in Fort St. John. You can sign up for any of those and all of them now at energeticcity.ca/newsletters. That's our show. Trey Lopashinsky and Jordan Prentice are the producers of Moose Talks. I'm Dub Craig. Be well.
Join us next Friday at 10 a.m. for another episode of Moose Talks, a weekly talk show about Fort St. John and the North Peace.